Hello and welcome to today's webinar From Process to Profit, the Bumble Bee Foods Journey to Efficiency and Competitive Excellence. My name is Anna Kulesheva and I'll be your moderator. In this webinar, you will learn how Bumble Bee Foods implemented a fully integrated solution to transform their business processes, drive efficiency, empower decisions, and shape their competitive edge. This event is live, so if you have any questions throughout for our speakers, please put them in the Q&A or chat box. We'd love to hear from you. And now I'm delighted to introduce our speakers, Jonathan Schwartz, Director of Global Planning at Bumble Bee Foods, and Odetta Pine, Solution Specialist at G7. Welcome both.
Thanks, Anna. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here.
And good morning. Thank you, everybody.
Yep. What a great start of this webinar. Obviously, thank you again for taking your time to join here. And since we're talking about S&OP today, Jonathan, Anna, I would like to launch two poll questions here to kind of see where everyone is in their S&OP journey, right? So the first one is, how mature is your organization S&OP process?
Let's give 10 to 15 seconds for everyone to submit their responses. And here are the results.
All right.
This is about what I expected to see.
Yeah, I was going to say, Jonathan, this is really interesting, huh? Great.
It is. The fact that it's a little heavier weighted on developing is not a bad thing because the process should always be evolving, right? And so I actually like developing as an answer. It makes sense.
Awesome. And Anna, can we keep going with the next question? What is the biggest challenge your team faces in S&OP? This is a really interesting one.
I have a hunch where I know this is going to land, or I think it's going to land. It's where I'm expecting it to land.
Another 10 seconds for everyone to submit their responses, and then we'll share the results.
Awesome.
That's funny. That's good. Wow. I actually expected it to be more heavily weighted on all of the above, but this is great. And it actually makes a lot of sense as well. Interesting that demand forecast accuracy is a little bit lower than the cross-functional collaboration. So I'm definitely interested later on to hear a little bit.
Yeah, but all of the above is the leading one, Jonathan, at 36%.
It is definitely the leading one.
Yes. Yes. Very interesting.
Well, I can speak a little to that, and this makes this makes a lot of sense. And at Bumble Bee Foods, we're not perfect by any means. And as I was saying, our processes are always evolving, and we're always changing, and we're always readapting to new times and new constraints and new challenges. I'll jump into the first in some of our business goals and just a little bit of background. Historically, and I'm just going to speak to the current role at Bumble Bee Foods, but historically, our company, we've had processes in place, we've had systems in place since, I don't know, it's probably been 17, 18 years now, probably going back to 2008. Forecasting and planning has always worked really well, historically, relying very heavily on the commercial team, the sales input, the trade, revenue management teams, the brand management teams in what they wanted to see happen. And being that it's a heavily commoditized business, it's very much driven by price. And so historically, their inputs were steady and the business ran really well. And sales inputs, the commercial team's inputs, were tried and true, and it was a lot easier to predict. Where their inputs are still extremely important to us. There's been a lot of changes now over the last 18, 19, 20 years. There's a lot more volatility. The behavior, consumer behavior has changed. Even our customer base of where shelf-stable seafood has changed, where it was very heavily driven in my grandparents' generation and then into my parents, and even still a little bit with me. I can only imagine my 10-year-old daughter. I can't see her opening up a can of tuna so quickly. But so what that's doing is it's causing changes in behavior from consumers, and at the same time as consumers are changing behavior since COVID, and even administration changes coming from all the way to the top down with tariffs and the new ways of doing things, retailers have changed how they want to hold inventory, how they want to handle open to buy dollars, their gross margin return on investment. Things are a little bit different. Stack them high, let them fly doesn't really work anymore. That push mentality doesn't work as much as it used to across most of anything in CPG. So what that's done is it's required us to continue to change and evolve and relook at our processes. So where we used to rely very heavy on sales, now the challenge is we've got to rely a little bit more on processes, on collaboration, on people and systems to be able to support that. So Odette and I, when you and I first started talking, some of the goals in what we want to be able to achieve in Bumble Bee, and we're continuing to evolve in our processes, and we're getting there and we're moving there, and it's taken some time, but it's an amazing journey. But we definitely want to see a hell of a lot more transparency across the supply chain. And I saw that cross-functional collaboration in that poll was one of the, I think it was the second largest.
The second largest, yeah.
Yeah, it was the second largest one in that. And so that makes perfect sense because it's something that we're always continuing to try to open up. And there's so much disparate data. And it's how do you make sense of that and be able to truly have that open collaboration and that open forecast where we don't want to hide our forecast. We want to share our forecast, right? Along with that, we should always be striving to improve our accuracy. You can have some of the best systems in the world, the best technology in the world, but if you don't have process and the people to truly define it, those tools won't do anything for you.
Yeah. So Jonathan,
yeah.
So that being said, what were some of the big challenges as you kind of started in the S&OP process? And again, you said you had a process and you just keep working on it and developing it to meet the current reality we live in, right? Can you talk a little bit more about the actual business problems? And then we'll talk about how you fix those, right? And what are some solutions?
Yeah, the business problems speak to both process and technology. Like I said, the process has had to evolve because things have changed and times have changed. If we rely heavily on sales and their sales forecast, we're going to have the wrong inventory in the wrong place for the wrong customers at the wrong time. Sales will push let's call it a field of dreams mentality. If you build it, they will come, versus we need to make sure that we're really truly at this point watching the bottom line. Our EBITDA, our inventory dollars are critical to our business and to everybody's business. So having the ability to really look and analyze history and analyze trends, analyze events, analyze seasonality, we have the ability today. We do have this, and we have a tool in place, and it's a bit antiquated. And the tools are powerful, but when you've got so many customers and so many distribution centers and so many SKUs, the mix and number of all those combinations make it really difficult to be able to truly look at history, analyze history, and figure out where you were so you have any idea where you're going.
Yeah.
Currently, right now with us, Odetta, we do have a system, and we're currently sourcing for new tools. But the problem is it's very time consuming in what we do because it's so manual, and the tools we have are very rigid. and they're limited into what our output really is. So without us having to take things externally, take them into Excel, take them into Power BI, look at biases and trends and forecast accuracy, it makes it difficult to get a better forecast.
Yeah.
That's probably one of the biggest ones, and that's the top bullet point that we have up on the top.
Yeah. So, when we talk about labor intensive, right? And we talk about manual from our perspective, right? As we're all about data, you got obviously your historical, you said, Jonathan, right? Coming in from your ERP systems and everything. And then you also have the planning side, right? The manual input. Now you're kind of, running your reports and models, and then now you're kind of modifying manually, right? So all of that process for Bumble Bee Foods, like how automated is that? And I mean, even is it even automated at this point, right? Fully. Because that's something we see all the time. We see the data entry, the extraction, and then not to mention the time-consuming reports, right? That you're producing for the board, for the C-suite, PowerPoint, Excel. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, it's partially automated. We're not manually statistically forecasting anything. We do have the tools to do it, but it's taking time. And so we have a limited number of resources and people that have the ability to analyze the history to figure out where we're going to go next. In order to do this, most of these processes are taken, and we've done a lot to help automate it. We have an amazing supply chain data analytics team that's really helping us take things out of the system, but put it into a Power BI where we don't have to do this as much in Excel as we used to. And we're continuing to evolve. And that's where our automation right now is going, is to Power BI, but it's not where we want to be. Where I want to be is in one integrated system that allows us to do all this together. So because it is time consuming, where we might take a good solid week to run the processes in order to have the collaboration for the following weeks, in order to then go to the next steps and speak to senior leadership, to present to an SNOP, or to speak to an IBP process. It is a full month from soup to nuts. We probably spend a little bit more time than I would like in building the tools into how we can analyze versus spending the time analyzing the tools and collaborating more with our cross-functional partners in sales, in marketing, in revenue management.
Yeah. Do you think, Jonathan, that there is a solution that is, all fully integrated that can solve all of these problems? We see this a lot, and I want to hear your answer to that, and then I'll let you know my answer to that too, and what we see actually. But um, what do you think on that?
So the answer is yes. I think there is dozens of tools out there, and like I said, we have a tool that we use today. As antiquated as it is, as rigid as it is, it allows us to do some of this. Not all tools are equal, and I think it really depends on business need which tools will work best. But I know, and in previous companies I've worked for, we've used tools that are very, very advanced, that allow us to take a lot of these manual processes, or these processes that are time consuming, or just those that we're probably a little bit more biased than we want to be in what even just correcting history might look like,
Right.
versus using a little bit more mathematical statistical approach. And so, yeah, there's some really, really good opportunities and options that'll take this week-long process that our demand planning team does and really shrink it down into just 1 or 2 days, because the system is doing most of this for us.
Most of the stuff, yeah. Yeah, and usually what we see is, I mean, one system really can't have it all, right? And we see usually with companies that there's at least, 3 good systems, or 3 to 5, I would say, usually, that serves a purpose, and then all of it kind of integrates together into, a user-friendly front view of it, right? Um, Great. Well, that being said, right, Jonathan, we talked about customization a little bit and whatever fits the box, right? Which kind of leads us to the next topic, which is the flexibility, right? I mean, statistical modeling is one of my favorite favorite topics to talk about. And I'm glad you brought it up, because at Bumblebee, you have quite a great team doing that. Can you let us know a little bit more about that, and how you guys got there, and where you're going with that, obviously?
Yeah, so we're not where we want to be yet, and we will be very, very soon. And like I said, we're constantly reassessing and making some amazing changes, and I'm really excited for what the future might look like, and where it might put us in terms of the analytical maturity model. Today in the tools, like I said, we are using a tool today. It is fairly rigid to use, and because of some of the rigidity and lack of resource in order to manage the tool, we are actually limited right now today in the models that we use. And it's not that the tool doesn't have the models, it's the fact that it's going to take a lot more analytics behind the scenes in order to use the right model. And just let me give you an example here, right? So one of the models, right now we're using almost a one-size-fits-all model, which is a single linear regression model. We are applying that pretty much equal across the gamut, across all of our different hierarchies and data combinations. Right or wrong, it's actually wrong in my opinion. It isn't the right way to do it. But the problem is because we don't have the resources to really analyze and segment the history to be able to then test it against all the other models that this tool does offer. It would take my team a little bit more than the week that they're currently taking in order to get the right models planned and forecasted. Now, it doesn't mean we're not striving to that. I have a data analytics team that's helping, but it's limited right now because of the amount of time we have in our monthly S&OP cycle. So where we are using a single linear regression model right now in order to plan our business, we have a data analytics team, which I actually believe is probably on this conference, if I know them correctly, that is trying to help us offline, looking more into machine learning and different models to help us get a better outcome while we're in the process of sourcing for better tools that'll do the work for us that right now the tools are forcing us to do manually.
Yeah. Yeah, you nailed it in the head when you said best fit methods, right? Or what we call it, the best fit model. And for you on the call, we're not that familiar with statistical modeling. When we talk about best fit models, we're talking about, automatic selection of the best model that fits for that specific SKU, for example, for that specific region, channel, product category, and so on and so forth. So, you going from, I guess, one size fits all, Jonathan, a single linear, model across the board at not at every level, right? To a best fit model with the different levels, but also an automatic selection for the best fit for that specific SKU. I think it's it's what people are doing nowadays. And I think with all the disruptions that we've had, right? We had COVID, and then the global trade issues and all that. The companies nowadays are really investing heavily on this model, the automatic model selection, where you just use some simple configurations, right? And then that kind of flushes out every model, more than 36 plus models for each specific SKU at all different levels.
And that's the goal, Odetta, is the tools should be able to do that, right? And to be able to do it quickly over a cup of coffee. Some of the issues we have today, and we've seen it, and I've seen it with multiple tools, is to be able to run those models at all the different levels of aggregation and run it in a time that's needed. A lot of times it bogs down systems, and systems will crash over it.
Right.
Not every model, not every level of aggregation takes every single model, right? Sometimes looking at things from a volume versus a mix, where the mix is going to look different, but from a volume perspective, some tools will do better at a much higher level. Whereas, you look a little bit more from top down into middle out and then bottoms up. And there's multiple models that will give better results at different levels of aggregation and then reprorate back down in order to get where you really should be in your best fit of what your expectations of where that business should go. And that's the current issue right now with some antiquated tools, or even doing this in Excel, is you can't do this in Excel. And if you do it in Excel, you're extremely limited in the modeling that you can run. In Excel, again, I've in past lives in different companies, you know, when you're forced to use that, you have to look at more of volume levels versus being able to really get down into a location level, right? My team's goal is to get the forecast in the right place at the right time. And when I say the right place, I need to have the forecast at the right DC where we believe the customer is going to order from, in order for the supply planning team to procure the inventory and put it in the right location in anticipation of the sales order that we think we're going to get, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And you just kind of nailed it in the head, and you mentioned the customer, right? Which kind of leads us into the next question I have for you about exogenous data, right? We live in a world where data is generated every millisecond. You know, we got TikTok, and we got, you know, Instagram, and we got, uh, you know, Uber Eats and Favor and all of this, right? What are you guys doing there, and what are kind of some of the biggest challenges, right?
That's a great question. We're starting to look at it. This last year, we've really actually been developing a lot more of the exogenous data sets. We're spending a lot more time looking at syndicated data, such as like Circana, for example. We started looking a lot more now at consumption data, point of sale data directly from the customers itself, going down to the specific store retail level, looking at inventory and item movement and price, and the effects of the price and price elasticity when we do run promos. There's even times we're looking at weather. And the reason why we're looking at weather is some of our products and where we fish and catch from, if the wind blows X amount of knots over a normal amount, they can't go out and fish, and trolling makes it really difficult. You know, so there's lots of different data we're looking at. So what are the challenges? And I love having this data because it is truly, truly shaping our forecast. And the forecast accuracy the demand team's using has been outstanding. And they're doing such a great job making those changes from the single linear regression model into a more consensus forecasting, because we're looking a little bit more forward looking, or a little bit, we're not as, it's more of a leading indicator than versus like a lagging indicator. So it's been wonderful. The challenge, I have it all in different places right now, right? And so it's very disparate. So be able to get
Yeah,
things
but
together,
it all ties together, right? Which again, you mentioned the forecasting part, right? The accuracy part of it, which kind of leads us into that cross-functional collaboration, right? The issues you have there currently with the process and the data inconsistencies, right? Like how consistent is your data? How accurate is it going from, you know, hand to hand and system to system, and then putting it all together, right? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, like the last 3 years, forecast accuracy has continued to just improve and improve. COVID threw everything off, but I think COVID threw everything off for everybody that's probably on this webinar. So I would have to imagine everyone's accuracy went the wrong direction, but it has continued to improve. And every single year, the demand team gives themselves a very hefty goal of about a 10% improvement on mean absolute error percentage, or a MAPE or weighted MAPE, depending on how you're calculating it. And every year they're achieving it by using a lot of the tools and things that we're talking about. And I think at a certain point, we're going to hit a point of diminishing returns if we don't continue to involve the process and we evolve the technology to support the process. We're going to hit a point of diminishing return, because there's only so much forecast value add the team will be able to give until we need a tool to actually give us better models, better methodologies, being able to tie in all the exogenous information that you're talking about into one source, use that all together into a little bit more of like a multivariate model versus like a univariate model, such as single linear regression.
Right.
So we will
and running
absolutely
those what if statements, right? Running those what if scenarios and all that good stuff instantly, where, you know, you can kind of make the right decision on the fly, depending on what, you know.
Well, you mentioned what if. What if's another amazing example, because the what if modeling right now for us, we do have a what if book, but the actual modeling for how it affects the supply side can be done way better right now using some of the newer technology that is actually looking at ML, when you're going, you know, what are the effects of inventory if I want to lower fill rate by 0.5%? Or if I expand distribution centers, what is the effect on my inventory level, and how much is that going to come up? how do I affect turns? How do we affect this, right? And the ability to do a lot more modeling, all of that right now is done in Excel, where
Yeah.
a lot of the newer tools and methodologies and even some of the ML models and Gen AI tools are able to do this for us much, much faster.
Yeah. And, you're kind of leading us to the next slide here, which is, all right, we have all these problems now, right? They go hand on hand. They're all over the place from, point A to point Z. You know, what are some of your advice on solutions, right? From a business perspective, that you can kind of give to everyone attending today here?
Yeah, process. Okay, so I'm going to start with the answer of process.
Yeah.
Process. Like I said, you can have the best technology in the world, but if you don't have the right process to support it, it doesn't do anything for you. The process is really key in honing in that process, and everybody's process across any industry is going to look a little bit different. In the multiple careers or jobs in my career I've had, the process has been very, very different across each one, but it's worked for what that organization needs. So right now, the process is going to be absolute key, and being open to evolving process and challenging your process in today's world is actually also going to be key. Then to have the technology to be able to support that and create more value add. You want the teams, I want my teams doing way more analytics than I want them building an Excel sheet or pulling BI files.
Well, I mean, that's what they were hired to do in the first place, right? To make those decisions and analyze it. So that kind of leads me to what we see, right? We talk about this as automation, right? And then when we talk about automation, I think currently in the industry, from a tech perspective, there is, two parts to it. You got the data integration, Jonathan, right? We live in a cloud world nowadays, so every system out there has some type of API connection that you can actually, build and automate, right? When we talk about data extractions versus manual downloads and inputs, we can use that to, automate. We also have a lot of RPA, robotics process automation, right? And this is more towards the daily manual work, step A through step Z, adding a little, robot to essentially help you do that, right? So that you can focus actually on analyzing the data, right? And making the right decisions as far as the forecast goes and increasing those forecast accuracy percentages, right? And we're also, we've been talking about Gen AI, right? Agentic AI. I mean, that is huge. Is AI there fully? No, but I think having these agents that sit on the, on the front of your process, but also on the back end, right? We talk about statistical models and all this, optimization, inventory optimization. We see that there's a lot of good agents, tools out there, bots that, can help optimize your process and kind of get rid of some of your manual, right? Thinking, time-consuming tasks. Another thing here that Jonathan, I wanted to ask you as well, we talk about centralized data sources, right? Nowadays, everyone's talking about Snowflake. We call this the DSS, decision support systems, or database management systems. How does that look like for Bumble Bee, right? What are some solutions you've kind of figured out that you can share with us?
I think when it comes to that, I think we're still figuring it out. We've got data. We've got a lot of data. Having data available to us at our hands to make it a little bit easier for our analytics teams to do the work is probably the challenge we have. So it's not that we don't have it. We have some really talented IT folks that are managing those data lakes, those data warehouses.
Right.
We don't use Snowflake. We do handle this internally, and we're using a lot of the Microsoft solutions today, right now, be it like Fabric and other stuff to be able to procure the data. As we continue to evolve and change in at least just my department for specifically OData, I think some of the newer tools and technology that I'm resourcing right now And we're trying to source and we're trying to procure at the moment. And we're going to be very, very soon moving further in that direction, are going to be able to take a lot of that data sources and put it together for us, kind of similar to like what a Snowflake does.
Right.
But Snowflake is data management in the back end, where this is going to take all of the different disparate data we have and bring it all together into the
Yeah.
tool, for the tool to be able to do the analytics for us and the dashboarding and everything. So right now we're taking all the data sources from the different places and we're bringing it into Power BI. Even that still has many challenges in if we need to bring in a new header, a new data set to something to complement it. There's so many challenges because it takes time and there's other teams involved, where I would love to have everything come into one place.
Right, right. And again, this kind of leads us into kind of standardizing this, reports and this, I guess, into the model forecasting, right? Can you tell us a little bit about kind of what is your best advice on using some of the forecasting, right? Some, I guess, solutions that you've seen, or can you talk a little bit more about that? And just the forecasting part of it and the aggregation?
Yeah, so I think we touched on it a little bit earlier. The forecasting is going to tell you the story of where you should be going to, right? Um, the, so I talked a little bit about our challenges, but where I want to be tomorrow is exactly what we talked about, and to be able to take all of the records that we do manage at such a low level. The hardest part right now for our demand team is to forecast is they collaborate very heavily. They face the sales team, the commercial teams, where our supply team is facing the suppliers. So they're opposite facing. Being
Right.
that said, their job is to get the right forecast at the right DC for us in order for us to supply and stock the inventory. But in order to get the right forecast at the right DC, they have to collaborate at an item and customer level, where our sales team doesn't necessarily care about the location, our demand team does. So there's lots of levels of aggregation and disaggregation that they have to focus on in order to get the right answer at the right place for us to put the inventory at the right place too.
Right.
So that's our biggest challenge. And that's where we talked about being able to aggregate and disaggregate and plan and forecast at lots of different levels, and then pick the best outcome at each level where we think it's going to be appropriate, whether it's based on an item level or a business level or a segment or a brand, or even just the volume as a whole. We want the flexibility, right? And so that's going to be the biggest challenge, where I know the newer tools will be able to help us.
Yeah. So Jonathan, again, I want to kind of bring it back to business, right? And people, because people are important, so important, right? It's the main drive. Let's talk a little bit about training, right? We talk about, yes, we want to do this and this, the data automation, integration, different best fit models and all this. But training is important, right? How do you have your people adapt, right? Can you tell us a little bit more there? And then we'll kind of lead this into the Q&A, because I know we're right at 9:34.
Yeah,
so yeah,
absolutely.
tell us a little bit more.
It's educational sessions such as this, such as PEX Network, and there's many other organizations out there that are constantly looking at how we're doing things today. The world of demand forecasting and demand management isn't very old if you really look at it, right? Demand management's not a very old methodology, but it is evolving really quick, and especially with the rise of Gen AI, and you mentioned agentic AI, which I am so excited about because of what that'll allow us to do quicker. With less people while we take on more, right? So that's going to be the overall key. But education is really key, and the ability to be able to open up your mind and say, what should we be doing, or what would be really amazing to be able to do? And then speak to people such as yourselves, who is a solutions provider, who's got that back end, who's got that programming knowledge, and says, let's build a solution that's actually going to be a little bit more custom to you, so that we can get you to that next level of where you want to be. So I would think that if you can innovate where you want to be, and even just imagine, right? Let's go back to our imagination as a child and what we would imagine the world to be. What do you imagine forecasting to look like?
Right.
With math, anything could be accomplished in this, right? And that's ultimately where I think this needs to go.
Couldn't agree more. Again, like you nailed it in the head. You have to, I think it's important to nurture a data-driven culture, Jonathan, right?
Oh,
Because
absolutely.
that's where it's at. We live and breathe in data, and that's what's showing us kind of, hey, what is that next business decision, right? And the next step we need to make sure we're fully optimized from point A to point Z, essentially. So that
Well,
being
and Odetta,
said,
on that note, real quick, just before, I know we
mhm,
probably want to wrap this up, like get some questions, and I know we have two
right,
more quick polling questions too, because we're curious where people are
right,
in that. But you talk about being more data driven and data driven decisions, and the analytical maturity model really speaks to a lot of that. And there's not a lot of companies that are out there that are all the way at the top of the analytical model, where they're basing everything off of cognitive behavior, which is full
right.
machine learning AI, Gen AI, agentic AI. um, a lot of us are somewhere right in the middle, right there between the descriptive, predictive, or prescriptive, and even prescriptive is really starting to move in that direction. We're very, very good, and we always should know where we came from a descriptive standpoint, right? And why did we see that outcome, and will that outcome actually happen again? Whereas we are into some predictive modeling. Limitations aside, we are into some predictive modeling right now to help us with those outcomes, and then the collaboration's going to help. Where I can't wait to strive is even not just the cognitive, but even the prescriptive,
The
where we could start
prescriptive,
making
yeah.
more data-driven decisions in the company, and that's where I really can't wait to get to.
Yep. And yes, Anna, I think we have the last two poll questions, and then we'll just open it up for Q&A. Which data source do you find most valuable for your S&OP decisions? This is dear to my heart.
I'll give 10 more seconds to submit our responses.
Yep. Thank you. Historical sales data, and then customer feedback, 42%. Wow.
I mean, customer insights is huge.
Yeah.
To get it
Yep.
directly from the source, from the buyers, is fantastic. Sometimes the challenge with customer feedback is given lead times. Some customers' feedback that I have found is our lead times might be a little bit longer than when the customer actually wants to provide that feedback and what they're going to execute.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's that historical data that you got to really rely on.
Yep. And then next one, please. Which technology tools do you use to support your S&OP process? Oh, this is a
Should
great
have put
one
an all of
too.
the above answer in this one too.
It's all of, right? I was gonna say, I think we missed that one. All right.
Okay, 10 more seconds for everyone to submit their responses, and then we'll share the results.
Yep. And then we'll time for some questions because I know we only have 5 more minutes. All right. Excel spreadsheets, 37%, followed by the ERP system with 33, and S&OP software, 22%. Wow.
Any surprise for you, Odetta?
No.
Excel
No,
is
this
so
is right
heavily
on in
still
the market.
used.
Yeah, this is right on in the industry. Everyone is on, manual Excel spreadsheets. Yep, live and breathe in Excel spreadsheets.
Yeah,
No,
absolutely.
this is
I
great.
saw a question in here from Max.
Okay.
If we're using any proprietary custom forecasting models, utilizing any existing ARIMAs or profits or a mixture of both. So the answer is sort of. Right now, we don't have the current tools that we're using for our S&OP process right now is not specialized yet really to do any of that. And the newer tools that we're going to bring on will be, and the tools are going to do it for us. We do have a data analytics team, though, that is running certain modeling offline using their tools. And they are running a lot of models for us based on certain data sets, maybe that we're struggling on, and then feeding that back to us to help us get a better forecast. So it's something that we're doing more offline. And the data analytics team is the ones that are really running that for us, just because the tools don't do it. Or at least the tools we have today don't do it. I know the tools we'll have tomorrow will.
Right. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Odette and Jonathan. And I've got some questions for you. Now it's the Q&A. So if anyone wants to submit their questions for Odette and Jonathan, this is your chance to do that. So what role does technology play in enhancing the S&OP process?
Yeah, it's so much. So like I said, technology itself will not solve a thing if you don't have the process and the people to support it. The technology's job is to help support the process and enhance the process. But I think it's so critical. It amazes me still today how many multi-billion-dollar companies out there are still doing forecasting in Excel or manually. And I'm stoked to hear that it works and it's fantastic, but what it could do for you in terms of value add and allow you to get even better outcomes so you can have lower inventory, higher turns, better fill rates, lower transportation spends. There's so many different benefits that the technology can give you across your entire supply chain, from planning all the way through logistics and warehousing and transportation, is critical in order to be successful.
Right.
Yeah, and we talked about automation, right? I mean, we talked about agentic AI, RPA, API integration. I mean, those are all tech solutions needed to automate a lot of this. So, yeah.
Right. And another question that I have for you, when assessing supply chain management software companies, how detailed was your process? And can you share a little about the journey you took?
Yeah, I'll try to do this quickly because this is a big question. My process
It's
is
very
extremely
important.
detailed.
It's very
Yeah.
important.
I wrote, so just for perspective, I wrote a 16-page business requirement document on what I'm looking for in a tool, anywhere from starting from what our mission was to our current problems. And actually even the slide that you have up here, to here, in fact, I'm going to go back in this slide and talk about the current business problems and where do we want to be and what does the future look like, all the way through specific criteria of what I'm looking for in terms of what I'd like the outcome of the tool to do. And we spoke a little bit about it in this already, where to me, the tool has to have the ability to be able to forecast a plan in different levels of aggregation at the ease of click of a button. I don't want to have to manually segment my business and then manually choose the models I want to run against that. I don't want to run alpha, beta, and gamma factors on my own. I would like the tools to be able to optimize those. I want the tools to be able to analyze the history and clean the history. I even want the tools to be able to look at history of where things should have shipped from, because maybe we made a substitution, which was a different business decision, but I needed the demand somewhere else. And I want the tools to do all this for us versus us doing it manually today. So I wrote a 16-page business requirement document with lots of insights of what needs to be critical versus what's nice to have. And I cared less about the nice to have features just because I've used tools historically that have so many amazing features that you get spoiled off of it.
Right.
So I do have the nice to haves, but the criticals to have are all of the things that I know that we can make our demand team create more forecast value add, and do less of the manual work, as well as put a far better outcome out there. So my process was detailed. I pulled through 6 or 7 different companies that I went through demos on. And it was a little difficult because everybody will promise you the world. Everybody will tell you their tools do everything that you ask for in the critical, and they're going to give you an amazing response back in their write-up. And I have found that when you really get into the nitty-gritty of the demo is when you can really sift through to find out, well, what does that tool really do? And some of those tools will work probably great for some of the companies. They didn't work great for what I'm looking for.
Right.
So the
And also
process
one
is
thing,
detailed.
yeah. And then one thing I wanted to mention here, we call it a proof of concept, right? A small pilot where, to Jonathan's point, right? You promise, promise, and promise, and then when you start digging, well, see your data in there, well, then you're disappointed, right? So doing a proof of concept is so huge for any companies looking to get something within SNOP, because that's where you see the real challenges: performance, flexibility, scalability, ease of use, all of that good stuff, right? So definitely do a proof of concept for sure. And then I think we have 2 questions, Anna, from Nyla.
Yeah, we do. Do you want to take them, Odette and Jonathan?
Yeah, since I have them up, yeah. How do you improve the business and increase the productivity, Jonathan? Are you talking about more of the how to improve the business, like the SNOP process, and how do you increase the productivity there?
So Nyla, I'll take a crack at, I think what
Yeah.
you're asking, and if I'm off basis, you always feel free to contact me after. It's a lot of what we spoke to. It's process, it's people, and then the technology to support it. In order to have your team more productive, you got to hone them in on what's really important. One of the big things this last year and a half that we did is we started focusing a lot more on KPIs, be it right now that it's outside of the tool, and soon enough it'll be inside the tool. But our analytics team has created some really good BI tools for us to really focus in on KPIs so we can actually manage what matters, right? So it's like the Pareto principle, right? The 80-20. Let's manage what matters, and let's focus on the subset of items that we can actually make a difference on that aren't doing wonderful already on its own by the single model we're using, right? If those models are giving us a great output, I'm going to let the tool do that part of its job and focus on what matters so we can actually improve on the forecast accuracy, which again, then downstream for planning, inventory, transportation, logistics, all of it will then see an ongoing improvement. So for me, I would say really segment your business into, you could look at the 4 quadrants of what's highly forecastable, what's easy to have better outcomes versus those SKUs that have terrible history and aren't easy. Focus on the ones that you're struggling on versus the ones that are already doing well on its own, running one model.
Yeah. And then also there is another question from Nyla here related to packaging line. Which type of automation have you implemented on packaging line to improve the efficiency? I'm not sure, Jonathan.
I'm not sure I follow the question.
Yeah,
so from
I'm
an
not sure I follow the
SNOP
question
side, right,
either.
where I want to separate out the operations specifically
With-
in what happens down at the manufacturing line to
Right.
improve efficiency, because the operations team is always looking at things to improve the efficiencies. The best things that I could do for them is give them a better signal in what to produce during that moment. And if they're able to adhere to the plan, then we have a better outcome.
Right. And I think we have some more questions coming through, Anna. I think there was another one from John, I believe. I'm not sure if I got out of it or not.
Oh, I don't see anymore.
Maybe it was
I think we could wrap up with another question talking about the pitfalls. What are the common pitfalls in SNOP implementation that organizations should be aware of?
Support. Change management is going to be so critical in this. No matter how amazing everyone's ideas might be and able to improve, if you don't have top-down support, top-down leadership support, especially from an executive side, it's very, very difficult to implement a process, let alone change a process. I'm fortunate enough to have some amazing leaders who are supporting the ongoing changes and development of our process. And so for me, it's been very, very easy to continue to evolve the process. And with the team that supporting this does just such a fantastic job. it's even better knowing that we've got everywhere from CEO down support for this process. So sometimes it might come down to educating on why the process, right? S&OP is a process, and why this process works so well and all of the benefits of it. Sometimes it might help to have consultants or outside agencies come in and talk about the process and the importance to help influence senior leadership. But if you don't have that top-down support, that's probably going to be your toughest part of it. Everything else below becomes noise, and you have to be able to work through that noise. And a lot of that noise is through education. Cross-functional partners will not always understand why you're asking for that collaborative approach. Our revenue management team might not know, why do you want their input and why does it matter? Because they have their own number. Sales has their own number, marketing has their own number, everyone's got their own number, but it's that collaborative, it's that consensus number that's really key. Because at the end of the day, everybody's individual numbers are wrong, but when you put them all together, they're far less wrong, right?
And they tell a story, right? We'll talk about the storytelling, which is so important in the S&OP process.
Yes.
And then there is another question from Chandra. Are you tracking forecast accuracy at the customer/DC level or just at the customer level?
Hi, Chandra. I know you. Yes. We are forecasting. So our accuracy, we're tracking at two different levels. The demand team's ultimately responsible at the item and DC level. Even though they collaborate at the customer level for an item, they are responsible for the item in the DC. And the reason for that is their most important job right now is to get the forecast to the right place so we can plan the inventory in anticipation for the sales orders that's coming in. So that for us is the importance. And that's what makes their job so difficult, is everybody's viewpoint is slightly different where they're looking. Where the supply planning team cares at an item location only, the demand team really cares about the customer and the item itself, less about the DC, or I should say they care about the DC, but the sales only cares about the customer and the item, right? So everybody's viewpoint, depending on who you're collaborating with in the organization, is way different. So it makes the demand team's job really, really difficult because we're asking them to forecast at such a low level of aggregation. And everybody knows, right? Forecast accuracy, the lower you go, the further out you go, your accuracy is poor, or is not as strong unless you get closer in and higher up, which you get a better forecast accuracy. So they have a hard job. And this is why I'm going to really heavily rely on some tools to use better proration logic to get it to the DC, so then they can really focus more on that item customer, which in turn will just help provide us the item and location. So I hope I didn't confuse you on that, but item location is the answer.
Great questions.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Jonathan and Odetta. That's been brilliant. Thank you for sharing your journey and your story of success. And I would like to remind our viewers that this session is being recorded, so you will be able to watch the recording on demand after we finish, and you'll be also able to share the link to the video with your colleagues or anyone you think could benefit from this story. And also, please feel free to reach out to Jonathan and Odetta either by email or LinkedIn if you wish to talk to them personally or follow up with any questions you may have. Thank you so much, Jonathan and Odetta.
Thank you, everyone. Catch us on the next few ones. Bye.
Bye-bye. Until then.